Welcome back to Yerushalmi Maasrot. We are Daf Beis Amud Aleph. The Shir is a zechus for all of Klal Yisrael and for the people who are with us here in the Shir. It's a zechus for all of us. We are talking about the heter to eat from the figs that have gone through a courtyard that are going in order to go somewhere else to be dried out. And these figs, they're going to be dried out. They're not complete yet. Now, if they were there for eating, the chatzah would fix their Maaseh status, even though they've not actually gone into the courtyard except to go to elsewhere. So Masechet de Rebbe, our mission is like the view of Rebbe. Now we're going to bring Rebbe soon. We bring us another brisa first. The Tali, let's see. Hevi to Edim ben Asada. You bring figs from a field. La'achlan, your intention is, you want to eat it in a courtyard which is not guarded. The shachach, by mistake you brought them in your home. Because these children, they get everywhere. The children went and took them into the house. Well, you know about it. You can take them back to the non-guarded courtyard and eat them there, temporary eating without taking Maaseh. When something's brought in the house by mistake, without your knowledge, that does not have a kavias for Maaseh. Alright? So it doesn't have to. Now, they only said that it's part of a Maaseh, Ella, you brought them into your house by mistake. He didn't know. He forgot. His kavanah to eat was going to eat in the outside courtyard, or the children brought it in without him knowing. Amazing if he brought it intentionally, even though he had das to take it out afterwards to a courtyard not guarded and eat them there, also that it's forbidden to eat it without taking Maaseh. Mantanisa. Now, which Tana is this brisa that holds that fruit brought in the house in order to eat elsewhere can still have a Maaseh obligation? Is Rebbe. The Tani we learned in the price. You bring figs from the field to eat, and you've brought them through your guarded courtyard. But your intention is you want to have it on the top of your roof. Your roof is not an area for Maaseh obligations, right? You don't have to take Maaseh if you're eating it there. Rebbe obligates you to take Maaseh because the Maaseh obligation came when you brought them through the guarded courtyard. Rabbi Yehuda Paiter, he says you're not chayiv. He holds the courtyard is not kaveah, fruit that's going to go in there just in order to go somewhere else. So the first price which holds the fruit going in the house in order to eat elsewhere is fixed for Maaseh. That's like the view of Rebbe. Now after the Gemara brings that the brisa mentioned is like the view of Rebbe, it comes back to what we said before, that even our Mishnah is also the view of Rebbe. Man Tana, so who is the Tana in our Mishnah who said, you're taking your figs in your courtyard in order to take them somewhere else. Liksais, you want to dry them in the new place. The wife and children can eat without taking Maaseh, because the figs are there for drying, they're not complete. It's mashma halai liksais. If you took it not for the sake of drying, but in order to eat somewhere else, then chayiv, then you would have a Maaseh obligation. And that because the Gemara Malacha is there. And who is that? This is Rebbe. This is Rebbe who holds the courtyard is kaveah, payers that have gone in order to eat elsewhere. Right? The courtyard is kaveah. Okay. Now we bring a story, huh?
I would have thought the rooftop just protected his courtyard.
The rooftop is not a fixed place for eating.
Through his courtyard.
No, if you go, if you climb up to the roof and you don't go in the house, there's no Maaseh obligation.
It's just as protected because people can't wander in and out of your rooftop.
How protected is your rooftop? Is that a fixed place to have your meal? Is it? Is that where you have your Shabbos meal, on the roof?
Some people like
No. The roof of Rosh Gaga is one of the exemptions. Kafifa Begaga, that's one of the exemptions. Okay. Now we bring a story with Rebbe and Rabbi Yehuda. Uda Bar Yishmael, B'Shem Rabbi Lazar. But Rabbi Yehuda, they were taking a basket of fruit. La'acharei ha'gagos. They were taking it from the street to the roof through the back of the house and not through the normal entrance which goes through the courtyard. So that in order to get out of that, they shouldn't have Paris obligation, Maaseh obligation. Rabbi Yehuda is always called a chassid, right? He was a pious man. And he sees them, and Amalek, he says, look, the difference between you and the earlier ones. Rabbi Kiva, in the earlier generations, he loved mitzvahs. He would find a way to do mitzvahs. Would buy 3 species with a pruta, to take mice on each one. And you're doing your bit to get out of it. To go on the back of the roof to exempt yourself. You find similarly in Bavli as well, don't you? Not like the earlier generations, the latter generations. Again, Gavim are going to go out of their way. Now, Mali la'achere agagos. Why did Rabbi Yehuda have to go and take the fruit, the back of the house, to exempt from Maaseh? I feel like Nisan b'chatzera. If they brought them through the courtyard, they wouldn't take Maaseh, because the intention was la'acham b'rosh gagos, to have the top of the roof. He's not going to stay in the courtyard. Now, this story, wasn't it with Rabbi Yehuda, who agreed that if you're taking figs through the courtyard to take somewhere else, they're not covered for Maaseh. So the Gemara answers, why they had to go to the back of the house, begin Rebbe David, because Rebbe was with him. Chamsun Chatzava, an elder once saw them, Rebbe and Rabbi Yehuda. Amalan, he says, Yavan liatun, can you give me some fruit in the basket? Amalan, they said, yes. Amalan, he said, Lavuchan Shavishma Le'avitun. So your Father in heaven, you didn't give the fruit. You didn't separate Maaseh. And to me, and Ali, to me you want to give. Okay. He wasn't asking for tzedakah. Tzedakah is also considered giving to Avim Shemaim. He's asking for a gift. Okay. Why is it they were mafkia? Why did they not want to do mitzvahs Maaseh? He says they didn't want to separate Trumas and Maestros but Tumah instead of Tumah. Agmar is near Mashma. It still wasn't right what they did. And although it's better to cause an obligation of Trumas and Maestros, even though it might be separated in Truma. So it still wasn't right what they did. Okay. There's Machlekes Amoraim about Shabbos is kaver for Maaseh. Let's say you gather fruit before Shabbos, and your intention is going to eat it after Shabbos. Rav Yochanan holds that in this case, Shabbos is kaver for Maaseh. But Shlokish holds it's not. So the Gemara wants to say that the Machlekes depends on the Machlekes Rebbe Rav Yehuda that we brought before. Rav Yochanan can Rebbe, and Rav Shimon Lakish is Rav Yehuda. It sounds like Rav Yochanan and Rav Lakish are arguing if Shabbos is kaver, fruit, that's just going through Shabbos. Basically, you don't intend to eat it on Shabbos. So similarly, they're arguing about courtyard, right? You take it through the courtyard and you don't intend to eat in the courtyard. Rav Yochanan will say a chatzah is kaver, even if it's just passing through. And Rav Lakish holds a chatzah is not kaver unless you have the intention to eat the fruit. Rav Yochanan, the Gemara answers actually the two arguments are not the same. It says Rav Yochanan could fit in like the other opinion, Rav Yehuda. He says Rav Yochanan can Rebbe. You want to say, Rav Yochanan's like Rebbe? No, not necessarily. I feel like Rav Yehuda, he could hold like the other opinion. The Chal says not kaver. It's like just fruit that goes through. Even though Shabbos is kaver, fruit that's going through Shabbos. Because Shabbos is more severe. Shekain even the sharim shenashru me'alein, fruit that falls of its own accord, and you have no intention, the owner asurin is still forbidden, and then nikva for Maaseh when Shabbos comes in. He holds Shabbos is kaver for Maaseh, even fruit that came without the owner's knowledge, right? And that's Rav Yochanan Paskin, fruit that you didn't prepare the owners for Shabbos just for another day, but they went through Shabbos, they're kaver for Maaseh. With a courtyard, everyone agrees the fruit that's going through the courtyard without the owner knowing is not kaver for Maaseh. So it could be that there, even Rav Yochanan agrees, the fruit that's just passing by in the courtyard is not kaver for Maaseh. And now we're going to say that which you wanted to suggest, that Masechet should agree with Yehuda. He says, I feel it Yisba Rebbe, even if he holds like Rebbe, that chatzah is kaver, chaymehu b'chatzah beis shemira. It's the severity with a guarded courtyard. It's more severe to be kaver for Maaseh than Shabbos. To Rav Yochanan Mekach, a transaction, v'chatzah in a courtyard with Shabbos, ain't on Torah. None of them are kaver for Maaseh min Torah, only rabbinical. Rav Yivish, Rav Shimon ben Lakish, and the one case between these, which is kaver min Torah, is zeh chatzah beis shemira. That's a guarded courtyard. He goes, that one is kaver for Maaseh min Torah. Okay, so you come out. According to Rish Lakish, chatzah is more severe than Shabbos. Chatzah is kaver for Maaseh min Torah. Shabbos is not. Shabbos is only Rabbanon. So although Shabbos meikol, Rish Lakish is meikol, that is not kaver, fruit that goes through Shabbos, but it could be a courtyard. He agrees we have to be strict like Rebbe, that even fruit that's just passing through the courtyard has a Maaseh obligation. Now the Gemara brings the din of Shimon bar Yochai about fruit that's gone in the courtyard and is on its way going elsewhere. Rav Yochanan Shimon bar Yochai, hayu lo shtei chatzeros. If you had two courtyards, achas b'Magdala, v'achas b'Tiberia, 2 different towns, right? 2 places nearby. Be'eviran, you took the fruit, Bezu, this one in the courtyard, Shul Magdila, you took it from the Magdila courtyard, and your intention is to take it from there afterwards, La'achlan Bezu, to eat it in the other courtyard in Shul Tiberia. Be'kiven she'eviran, when you pass them through the first courtyard, Derech Heta, that was not Kaver for Master, because they were only going on their way to reach the second courtyard. Therefore, Mutter, you're allowed to eat it on your way to Tiberia without taking Maisa first. As the Rishim Ben Yochai, the din of Rishim Ben Yochai is like Rabbi Yosef Yehuda, that fruit going through a courtyard in order to take elsewhere is not Nikva for Maser. And therefore he holds that taking it to a courtyard in Magdala in order to go to a Chasa in Tiberia is not Kaver for Maser. And the din of Rishim Ben Yochai is Ruba, he even's more lenient than Min Rabbi Yosef Yehuda. Because Min Matam Rabbi Yosef Yehuda, that which he said, in a case where you're going to be ba'omed, you're like standing and eating the fruit b'makom patur. Let's say you brought them in a courtyard in order to eat at the top of the roof, right? Which is no chayiv maasrot on top of the roof. So that's what he's saying. You're going to take the fruit to a makom patur. Madam Rishim Ben Yochai is talking about a case ba'omed where you're eating the fruit b'makom chiyuv in an obligation place. So Rishim is talking about someone, you're bringing the fruit to eat it in another courtyard which is kaver for maser. And even so, the pasuk given Shevir Derech Heta, you're just taking them through the courtyard. The first courtyard, they're just going through it in order to go elsewhere. Therefore, there is no Meiser obligation, or Mutter is allowed to eat it on his way to Tiberia. So Rishim Yochai goes further, right? Rishim Yochai said even if you're going to eat it in the second courtyard, there's still no Meiser obligation in the first courtyard. Okay, now the one brings a kula of another Tana, that a courtyard which is kaver for Maser, and he brings this kula is greater, even more than the kula of Rishim Yochai. He says, Rabbi Lezer, the leniency of Rabbi Lezer, we're going to bring now, Ruba is greater in Israel from both of them, more than Rabbi Yehuda and more than Rishim Yochai. Rabbi Lezer says in Trumas, if you're eating grapes in the garden, and then you go, while you're eating, into a courtyard, you can finish the grapes without taking Maser. And the reason is, you started eating them in a permitted way before you went in the courtyard. Mutter, you're allowed to finish your eating without taking Maser, even when you go into the courtyard and you take them into the courtyard. And then this leniency is greater even than Rishim Yochai's one, because Rishim Yochai never allowed you to eat the fruit until you go into the courtyard in Tiberia, right? And Rabbi Lezer allows you to eat the fruit if you carried on eating before you go into the courtyard, to finish eating even after you've entered the courtyard. Yeah, this Rabbi Lezer holds, look, if you start it outside, it doesn't matter you've got it in the courtyard, you can still just carry on eating without taking Maser. Hamoitzi Perlov, you take your workers out for ploughing the field, whatever. If they take on food instead of their work, it's like a transaction, and they can't eat from the baskets or from the bunch of figs, because the fruit which is in these places is ready Gemar Malacha, and it's kaver for Maser because of the transaction. Nicha, I understand they can't eat lo min hasam, lo min hakufa, not from the basket, etc. Because the fruit in the basket is ready Gemar Malacha, it's kaver for Maser through the transaction. But what the Mishnah says for lo min hamuksa. Now why is that? Now the figs in the muksa, in the drying place, in the storage place, they're not yet Gemar Malacha until they're actually put in vessels. So we should have said, Kamadat Temet Hamon, just like we said, Melakate, the buyer, let's say, collects things from the tree of the seller, achaz, one by one, but he eats it without Maser. Instead, if he puts two together, Chayav, he has to separate Maser before he eats it. But Emor of Hachakate, so we should say the same thing here, that the workers are allowed to eat from the muksa bit by bit, as long as they don't put two together. It's like muksa also is a he says that storage facility, we treat it as mitzorf, as if you've joined up all the figs. So they're kaver for Maser through the transaction. Now we said in the Mishnah, if you hire a worker for doing work on olives, and you made a condition that he'll eat from the olives instead of his work, he can eat one by one, or pato is pato from taking Maser. But if you put two olives together, then he's chayav, because by putting them together, you're mashiv the peros like the Gemar Malacha, okay? And then they are nikva, then the Maser obligation has begun. Tali the base Rebbe, we learned the price in the base Medrash Rebbe. Now if the worker makes a condition, he wants to be paid olives. He can eat as he is normal, one, two, one. or possible he doesn't have to take Maser. Rav Yoda boy, man Ankion, what are we talking about? If he was hired, right, to squeeze the olives, or pick the olives from the trees, etc., then everyone agrees he can eat as much as he wants. Or possible he doesn't have to take Maser. He's entitled to eat from the olives because of the chus the Torah gave him, not because of any condition. If he was hired to work on the actual trees, the olive trees, to plough under the tree, then everyone agrees he can eat one by one, it's potter. If he put two together, he's liable. If he's not working in gathering the actual fruit, he can't eat midin Torah. And the eating is only because of an agreement with the Balabais, and it's like a transaction. So in which case is the argument? And what are we talking about? He's hired to detach olives, the bad olives. He's pruning the bad olives, in order those that are remainder will grow well. So although it's done with the olives being detached, but it's not for the sake of these olives, it's for the olives that are left behind, right? That's what it's the primary purpose. So the Mishnah holds it's not a malacha considered a malacha with peres telushim, therefore he's not in this one, he can't eat from the Torah, he can only eat because of an agreement with the Balabais, it's like a transaction. Whereas the Brisa, the base Medrash Rebbe holds, at the end of the day, the malacha is with the fruit which is detached. He's like any worker is involved with detached fruit, and he can eat midin Torah, and it's not considered like a transaction. Min de Basra, from the end of the Mishnah, we can bring a proof that you're detaching, you're weeding out the bad stuff for the sake of the good. But it says one who hires a worker, the nachesh b'vitzalim, right, to start pruning amongst the onions. You're removing the bad onions, so the rest will grow well. If the worker said to the Balabais, I'll work for you, in order to eat the olives, the onion leaves for my wage. Mekate, he can detach leaf by leaf and eat without taking maser. In Sirah, if you put two leaves together, Chaim, you have to take maser. So since we find at the end of the Mishnah, it's talking about pruning the bad olives from the good ones, so probably the earlier case, you're doing work on the olives, it's talking about you're pruning the bad olives from the good olives. Okay, now the one talks about that which it says, if you find, let's say, figs that were dried out, even if, let's say, next to a field where they dried out these things, or fig trees on the way and you find figs underneath it, there's no problem with gazel because it's hefka, and it's potter from maser. Okay? Now why is it these figs are potter from maser? Rav Chagai Sholach Habraya, he asked the Chaverim, Ma'ahan potter zinin lahacha. What's the reason of the patur here? Why are these figs found on the way? Why are they potter from maser? Amrullah said, Shembayach al aray b'sadeh b'hu potter. Mishnah's talking about you're eating figs in a temporary manner, and you're eating them in the field, you don't have to take maser. If they've not seen your house, right, they've not become tebel, and you can eat it as a temporary eating. Amrullah, Rav Chagai said, Sina masnisa, Shembayach al aray b'sadeh yehi potter. Is that what the Mishnah is telling me? Because you're eating the fruit of chilas arai, you don't have to take maser. We know this, we've seen it elsewhere. You don't have to mention it again. He says the kavanah of the Tana is to tell you that the figs are potter mishum was the owner's given out, and hefka, and a proof for this shekain from the Mishnah mechnisa labayis. If you bring it into the house, potter is potter. You don't have to take maser on these figs. Even though bringing the house usually brings out a maser obligation, and you can't eat it even arai, it must be, why is there a patur here? The reason why they're potter, because they are hefka. Hefka is potter from maser. I bring a brisa where you see the patur from maasrot is because the fruit is hefka, not because it's a temporary eating. The tani learns in a brisa, maser kalkala mechupa. You find a basket of fruit which is covered over by olive and leaves. Asura v'shum gazel. You're not allowed to steal it, and one who takes for himself is over, and it has a maasrot obligation. Now, Asura Mishum Gezel, why is it also for stealing? Because the covering with leaves is a sign, and therefore you can return it to the owner by him guessing the right signs. So the owner doesn't give up hope. And even if the owner is misyayish, and the first one who finds it is allowed to take the basket. But this Yush doesn't pater because it's after the Gemar Malacha. The Chayavim b'Maasrot and the fruit is Chaim Maasrot. Why? Because Sha'ad Achshav until the time of Yush das Badim Aleh. Yonah was thinking about it, and Yush when it's after Gemar Malacha does not pater. So you're saying what the owner is still thinking about it. He says here, Yush is like Hefker. It only paters after Gemar Malacha. Yeah, it's got to be reach the fruit, a level of completeness. What do we see here in the words of Chagai? That the figs in the Mishnah are pater from Masa because of Hefker. What difference is there between a basket and the brisa, which is Chaim Maasrot, and the ones in the Mishnah which are pater? If the reason is the Mishnah paters them because it's Achilas Arai, it's not seen in the house, the Chaverim of Chagai, why doesn't the brisa then pater the fruits in the kalkala for the same reason? It must be the Mishnah, the brisa, talking about even someone is eating keva, and the Mishnah still paters because they're hefker, and that's you understand the difference. That the figs in the Mishnah have no simon and they're hefker, and they're pater from masa, and the ones in the basket in the brisa have a simon, they're not hefker, they are chayav from Maasrot. Now the Gemara brings the hemshach of the brisa. After we said that basket is awesome from Gezal, it asks, how far does it go? How far do you have to hold on to this fruit and guard it for the owners? As long as they're good quality, that you can be taking truma from good quality. Use this fruit for separating truma and maseh. But once the fruit starts getting ruined, if you couldn't take truma from good quality anymore, you work out monetary value, and you take the basket for yourself, you eat the fruit, and you've got that money set aside. Rav Yoina asked, let's see if there's anyone at the door. So this is when a person swaps the money for fruit. By swapping the fruit for money, is that like a transaction? Yeah? Is that like a transaction? Because you're giving the money for the sake of fruit. Okay, ready? Thank you. So Rav Yoina boy, let's go back a couple of lines. So the question is, when you find fruit, and you're swapping the fruit for the money. By giving fruit for money, is that a transaction? You're giving money for the fruit. Therefore the fruit should become tebel. The transaction is tebel amasa. Or maybe, the owners, when they want to receive their basket, if they don't want the money, they want the fruit, they take it away from the one who finds it against his will, and even after they swap the money, basically swapping was done without their knowledge. Therefore, there's not proper transaction here. Maybe it's not reached a tebel status. So that's the thing. You put this money for swapping it with the owner for this fruit. Is that tebel status or not? Rav Manaboy, he asked, how can you honestly think that swapping the fruit for money is not a transaction? He says, think about it. If one fig was in the mouth of the one who finds it, surely it's repulsive, in the eyes of the owners. If that's the case, Yachalu lazira. Do you honestly think the one who finds it can give it back after it's been in his mouth? He can give it back. So you see that any fruit at the time of eating goes to the finder. So this sort of fruit, of course, is a proper transaction, and it becomes tebel. If you want to suggest, like you wanted to say, that swapping the fruits for the money is not a transaction, and the fruit is not tebel at the time of it, and you're allowing the moitzi to eat it achilas arai without taking maser, surely it can be that at the time of eating, the fruit in his mouth becomes tebel, and therefore he's being nichshal by eating tebel. It can come out that the person finds out about it and he's eating tebel. The Amram, this tells me that the fruit in his mouth, which he can't return it to the owners, has got a din of a transaction, and he's not allowed to eat some fruit, even arai, without separating maasrot. Because we're worried maybe he'll be nichshal in eating tebel. Okay. Masal kalkala, if you find a basket of fruit, says the din. So Malcolm should write machlis in the shuk. If most people have the fruit, they take it to sell in the market. they don't take it to their home. Also, you can't eat it even arai. You can't eat it temporary because the fruit made for selling in the market is tevel when it's complete, and this basket is ready nigma melachtai u'masakna demai. If you want to eat from the fruit in the field, you have to be masakin the fruit by taking ma'aser b'toras demai, right? You masakin it as demai. But if you find it, b'makom sharov, where most people don't bring it to the market, but most people machnisin lebotim, most people take it into their homes, then mutalai chamani, you can eat from it arai until you bring it to your home, because the fruit has not yet seen any home. It's not tevel. Or masakna vadai, and once you bring it at home, this becomes proper tevel. You have to be masakin it by being meisering it like they did tevel vadai. Mersa, if in this place it's 50-50, some people take the fruit to sell in the market, some take it to their home. You don't have a rov. You have to be strict like both sides. So if you want to eat it arai, basada. In the field, you can eat it temporary, but you can only eat if masakna demai. At least you have to separate demai, separate the maasrot in case. Maybe the fruit was going to be sold in the market before it got lost from the owner. Maybe it's tevel. Maybe you can't eat it arai, so you have to separate trumas and maasrot as demai. Machnisa labayis, if later on you decide, I'm going to take it in the house, you cannot eat relying on that. But masakna vadai, you have to take separate, definite truma and maser, right? Mm-hmm. You have to assume nothing's happened yet, and you will take proper trumas and maasrot now. Okay. Okay, how are we doing? Get to the Mishnah. Oh, it's quite a way to Mishnah. We'll see. Okay. We learnt in the last part of the Brisa, if some of the people from the field take their fruit to the market, some take it to the home. So you have to separate maasrot when it's in the field, like demai, and then when you bring it to your home, you treat it again as proper teva. So the Gemara has a question. Rav Yonah boy, demai mal shitva lebada. Now, you bought fruit from an amaretz. You took maser with a demai result, so you took maser out of doubt. And you also separated trumas maser. Then you find out the fruit was proper tevel. And you have to go and separate it again as vadai now. You have to separate vadai. Are you allowed to eat from it arai before you go and separate the vadai afrasha, as long as it's not seen the home? Or do we say no? It became tevel through separating the trumas maser of demai. It became tevel then, and you can't eat from it even arai. Like every Havrash's Truma, which is Torah. In my Imad came, the Gemara answers, if you're going to tell me that separating Trumas Maser as Demai is not Batel, even if it turns out the fruit was definite Tevel, then how can it say in the Brisa that in the field you're separating Demai, and you bring it in the house, you separate Vadai, and then separate Truma Gedola? Because Loinin says Magdim, you're ending up putting forward the hafrosha of the maasrot in the field before the hafrosha of the truma later on. Mm-hmm. The truma is only happening once you go into the house and you separated maaseh earlier on. You're not allowed to separate maaseh before truma. It must be the hafrosha which is done as demai from fruit which is definite tevel is a hafrosha by mistake and it's not chal. And therefore there's no hamdama of putting maaseh before truma. And therefore we worked out the question of Rav Yonah that separating demai from fruit, which is vadai tevel, is not chal at all, and therefore you're not making all the fruit tevel. Now the Gemara brings the proof of an Amora, who argues on the Gemara of the answers the Gemara's answer. He said, if you separate hafrosha of demai from fruit, which is vadai, it's not a mistake. The hafrosha is chal. And in the case of the Brisa, when you're mafresh hafrosh of demai in the field, you have to make a condition and say, if this basket is from those where the owners take it to the market, and it doesn't need vadai, only needs demai, then my master demai should be chal. If it wasn't those going in the market, it was those going in the house, and once it goes in the house, it'll be tevel proper, it'll need proper hafrosha, lo yasisi klum. then the hafrashas maasros of demai should not be chal at all. Now Yerushalmi Yitzchok explains why this condition is needed. Shalai tehei ma'asin shmachnisin lebatim. We don't want this basket to be one you take in the house, and we didn't separate truma gedola. But then it says trumas maaser, and then it comes out that the trumas maaser that you separated in the field as demai tavula la truma gedola. Basically, it never had truma gedola being taken. What he says is like this: we took truma gedola after it was in the house, right? We took trumas maaser earlier on. So maybe it's not Masechet, the Trumas Maaser already separated in the field, and the Cohen who receives the Trumas Maaser which was separated in the field will eat Tevel. Therefore, he wants to make a condition at the time of the hafrasha of Demai that he's mafresh in the field, it should only be chal if it was those fruit from those that they're bringing to sell in the market, okay, and that Truma Gedola has already been separated. I only want the Trumas Maaser to be chal if I've already separated Truma Gedola along the way. You understand? That's the condition he's putting in place. But if it's those that's going to go in the house, remember, when you're taking in the house, it means nothing's been done yet. You have to separate definite in the house. It's vada in the house. So when it's going in the house, and therefore no Truma Gedola has been chal yet, then the hafrasha you separated earlier is not chal. The hafrasha you're doing in the house is chal. And that's how you get out of the problem. So you say like this: there was a problem, you're separating Trumas Maaser in the field. Okay? But it's all very well, we don't want that to be before the Truma Gedola, which comes later on. So you're saying if you're bringing Truma Gedola later on, then what happened before was nothing at all. Okay? And if you're that's what you have to say. If it's being brought in the house, and you never separated Truma Gedola, then the hafrasha of Trumas Maaser in the field will not be chal. But the hafrasha that you're mafresh in the house, that's where you're saved from all trouble. Mersa. Now what happened if there was 50-50? You find a basket in a place where half people bring it to sell in the market, half of them bring it into their home. You want to eat the fruit, basada in the field. Mesakna demai, you treat it as demai. Machnisa labais, when you bring it in your house, mesakna avadai. You have to assume nothing's happened, as if it's proper tevel. Now, how can you be mafresh vadai and Truma Gedola in your house? For Chal Shlomo, we should worry. Shema, maybe this basket was Moesin Shemachnis in the Shuk. Maybe it was one that was being brought into the market, and maybe Truma Gedola already been set. Truma Gedola already been taken before everything now. But this is Truma Gedola, and the Truma Gedola you're being mafresh. The problem is like this: you're doing Truma Gedola again. But maybe you've done Truma Gedola already. Now you bring Truma Gedola with your mafresh in your home. It's extra, and it's not Truma. It's Tevel. You have to separate the other maasros on it, from other fruits. But the hafrashas of maasros you're doing later on, that will not correct the peiros that you separated beforehand for the sake of Truma, and that Truma is Tevel because it's Tevula the Trumas Maaser. It's considered Tevel as far as Trumas Maaser is concerned. And when you give it to a Cohen as Truma Gedola, the Cohen will be eating Tevel. But maybe it's not effective, basically. That once the Truma was brought earlier on, this Truma now can't be effective, right? As he says here, it's not going to be Truma. It's going to be Tevel. You have to separate all the other maasros. And you're not going to correct the fruit that you separated beforehand for the sake of Truma. So this Truma is Tevel, because the Tevula the Trumas Maaser. When you give it to a Cohen as Truma Gedola, the Cohen's eating Tevel. So in order to prevent that, you have to make a condition when you're separating the Truma in your home. The Truma will only be chal if you've not yet separated Truma Gedola. But if, however, the fruit is there to be brought into the market, and you've already separated Truma Gedola, then the Truma that you're separating now in your home is not going to be Truma. Rav Matanya said, the Kohen Shema Masrot Daf. He says you don't have to make a condition, right, with the Tanaim, the words Rishon ben Yitzchok, to prevent these problems Rishon ben Yitzchok was worried about. You have to explain that at the time when you're separating Truma Gedola in your home, if the hafrasha is not chal because it's already been done and the fruit remains tevel, you're giving it a name Maaser or Trumas Maaser on this fruit, and so it depends on what's happened yet so far, and you will spell out that the Hafroshas Truma Gedola that you're doing now will only be chal also on any Trumas Maaseh you separated beforehand in the field, if there's a need for it. Basically, you're covering yourself. You're saying, well, if it's needed, it will cover what's happened before. Right? What were the worries? He says the worry was, maybe the basket's bringing the home, you not separate Truma Gedola. Now you separate Trumas Maaseh in the field, there's still Trumas Maaseh Tevel for Truma Gedola. And the Truma you separate afterwards in your home will not correct the Trumas Maaseh you separated in the field, because it's already been separated from the rest of the fruit. And it's not included in the fruit where you're mafresh Truma Gedola to cover it. The other worry was, maybe the basket is from those being taken to the market, and Truma Gedola was already separated before it reaches you, and when the finder separates Truma Gedola after he reaches it in his home, the hafrosha will not help, the fruit will remain tevel, because hafroshas maasros that you're separating afterwards will not be chal on this fruit, because he thinks that it's truma, and it's not really truma. So in order to stop all this, he passes it like this. First of all, you should spell out that if you haven't separated Truma Gedola in the field, then some of the fruit that you're mafresh now in the field as Trumas Maaseh will be Truma Gedola. And also, when you separate Truma Gedola in your home, you will spell out that if the hafrosha is extra, because we already separated Truma Gedola in the field, then you're giving a name for all the maasros that you have to separate from this fruit now that I'm separating as Truma Gedola. Okay, fine. I think we will stop here.